It's the knock on the door that more people than ever are now dreading.
Literally every day there was somebody ringing us, or we had an email, or we had a letter. It was literally every other day, and then it got too much, to be honest.
With a cost of living crisis, debt is booming. Business too for the firms cashing in on the finances of the most vulnerable. Channel 4 News and the Bureau of Investigative Journalism have been looking at a looming debt crisis and those who are profiting. The fear of spiralling debt has dogged Michael and Catherine Mason for years. She has complications following brain surgery and he's her full-time carer. Unable to work and with a family to look after, their finances spun out of control.
It was desperation.
Confusion, guilt, shame, all the emotions you can think of, because we didn't want to get in that situation.
In 2021, they got a call from a company offering to help them with a repayment plan called an Individual Voluntary Arrangement, an IVA, costing £80 a month. But after they signed up, they struggled to keep up with payments and were driven into even more debt. How many times have you felt like you've had to cut back on how much you've eaten?
About 8 to 9 times. We didn't do shopping 1 week at all, did we?
No, we had to live off whatever we had in the freezer or in the cupboards.
Luckily we got help from friends to give us a food parcel. We don't want that for our kids.
They turned to a local law centre for help, and it was only then that they realised they were part of a growing trend of those sold IVAs they couldn't afford.
Did you feel that things had been explained clearly to you? Do
No.
you feel
No.
like you went into that situation with your eyes open?
No.
No, because there was lots of things in there. I mean, the paper at the centre was nearly 50 pages long. But we told them I had dyslexia. I told them I couldn't understand jargon.
In principle, an individual voluntary arrangement isn't bad. It's an alternative to bankruptcy for those who want to keep expensive assets like a house or car, who can afford to make monthly repayments for around 5 to 6 years, with an IVA company taking up to £4,000 in fees. There are other avenues, though, like a debt relief order, an easier and cheaper option for those who rent and live on benefits or have less than £75 spare a month. It costs just £90 and wipes out debt after a year. But you might have spotted a crucial difference. In the IVA, insolvency companies have struck gold, pocketing thousands in fees and often paying third-party companies to reel in customers for them. To see how some of those cashing in on IVAs operate, the Bureau of Investigative Journalism poses a single mum with benefit-only income and less than £75 a month spare, someone who'd qualify for a much cheaper debt relief order. We asked a debt solicitor to listen.
You don't want to be in debt when your daughter grows up and all the rest of it, so I do want to help. A debt relief order and bankruptcy, we can get rid of those completely, straight away.
That would be one of the first things that we'd be looking at.
But he rules it out straight away.
Absolutely, I cannot understand why he's done that.
Is there any way you could cut back on? Anywhere you've overestimated on something?
They're just massaging the figures to make it work.
DROs can be very strict. They only accept 100 applicants, so if you apply, you might get rejected and lose your £90.
That's just rubbish.
If I were to take food out of your daughter's mouth, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if that was the case. Do you know what I mean? But if you could do it, it's worthwhile checking if you could be eligible.
The other option is a government scheme called an IVA.
It has no greater government backing than bankruptcy and debt relief orders do.
So why do you think they're so keen to describe only the IVA as the government-backed option?
Because that's what they're trying to flog to people.
A new survey from Citizens Advice Bureau found 3/4 of those who are or have been in an IVA said they struggled to make repayments. Nearly 40% said it had had a negative impact on their debt levels. And 84% of debt advisors said they'd spoken to clients in either failed or unsuitable IVAs. One of the biggest drivers behind bad advice are the referral fees that IVA companies pay third parties to reel in customers. Those are often worth hundreds of pounds. Now, the financial regulator's trying to bring an end to that practice, but that hasn't stopped a cottage industry of online debt advisors gathering pace and using ever more extreme tactics. The debt Charities step change even found its branding, charity registration number and website had been stolen by an outfit calling itself Step Change Plans, almost identical bar the URL. A call operator linked to this fake website said he passed clients over to most IVA firms. We contacted the company he worked for but got no response. IVA regulation is a complex patchwork with no one body overseeing the industry as a whole and no powers to hold the companies at the top of the chain to account.
The problem is this is likely to get worse as a cost of living crisis intensifies, and government need to get off the sidelines and give people the access to the regulated financial advice they so desperately need.
Would you agree with a definition of IVA as debt wonga?
I think I recognise some of the picture that you're describing, and one of the very disturbing things about what we've seen during the pandemic and the subsequent cost of living challenges is the way in which unscrupulous actors particularly pursue vulnerable customers.
Some of these firms are really respectable that are involved in this.
Michael and Catherine are now terminating their IVA with the help of Derbyshire Law Centre. They've spent more than £1.5 grand and are now back at square one. Their debts still outstanding.
It's not easy because you don't want to be seen as vulnerable, or you don't want to be seen as daft, or you don't want to be seen as, oh, not another, somebody else that needs help. You don't want to feel like that.
It's embarrassing, I think, as well.
Yeah.
To say that you've got that low or got to that point.
But these companies just prey on the vulnerable.
Figures out last week show more IVAs were sold last year than ever before, nearly 90,000. It's an industry worth billions, but just how much of it's made off the backs of those with nothing to spare.
That report from Amelia Jen. Well, earlier I spoke to the Labour MP Angela Eagle, who's on the Treasury Select Committee, and I began by asking her why the current regulation of IVAs doesn't seem to be working.
I think it's not working because it seems to not be in one place. So the Financial Conduct Authority has some role to play, so does the Insolvency Service. Things seem to be falling between two stools, and then you've got the aggressive and downright misleading advertising that's happening on social media platforms like Facebook and TikTok, all of which is selling false perspectives where some cowboy companies pretend that they're actually properly regulated financial advisors when they're just con artists. And so there's a whole range of areas that I think the government needs to get a grip on to protect consumers.
And there's a whole range of companies involved in this, and you talk about some cowboys, but one extraordinary loophole seems to be that the companies at the very top of the chain are often very reputable, very smartly branded companies, but seem to be immune from any sanction in this area.
Well, I think the thing is that we've got to stop the charging of fees. And once you stop the charging of fees, the sort of financial model that a lot of the cowboy companies that missell these things use to make money will dissolve. So we need to have a system which is much more joined up. We need to have early warnings about the kind of things that are developing in mis-selling in these markets. And we need far faster, far more robust action to prevent the damage that's obviously been done by the mis-selling of these IVAs, which has left some people out of pocket and still not out of debt.
I mean, can it be left to the companies themselves, or is this something that will only be dealt with by regulation? Any role for government?
I think there is a role for government and regulators, and they should have been onto it faster. I think where anything is sold for a fee, and that fee is quite substantial, there's an incentive for people to be put on to IVAs when it's not right for them. And so as soon as there's a financial profit incentive, you get mis-selling. So that loophole needs to be closed. And I hope that companies that deal with insolvency will realise that being associated with these aggressive, mis-selling, Wild West exploitative companies is not good for their image.
I mean, in really simple terms, what could the government do right now?
The FCA has already announced that it's going to ban fees. That should certainly be the case. There should be much more warnings about the kind of misleading and fraudulent advertising that's going on Facebook and other social media companies.
We've seen a huge rise in the number of these IVAs taken out over the last year or so. Do you worry that the cost of living simply means more and more vulnerable people will be targeted by companies offering to solve their debts?
I think it's clear that the financial pressures coming along the track with the increasing cost of living squeeze and the fact that trading conditions for those with businesses are going to get worse before they get better means that insolvencies are likely to go up. People need to be vigilant, and I'd like to see the regulators being much more proactive to make certain that those who are in difficulty know that an IVA is not necessarily the best thing that they can take out and use.
And any direct message to some of the bigger companies who may use third parties to do the aggressive selling? What would your message to them be?
Well, my message to companies like that is don't outsource the selling of products that are going to be mis-sold and then claim that somehow it's nothing to do with you. We see you, we know where you're getting your profits from. Straighten up your act and do the right thing for your customers rather than just your profit line.
Angela Eagle, thanks very much for talking to us today.